Good afternoon, everyone. Just put on my spectacles. There we go. I can see you all. All right. Thank you for coming out for another Lunch and Learn on Brightspace. I'm just going to share my screen and then we'll get into it. Now, in case you're unaware, the Tuesday and Thursday sessions for Lunch and Learn are focused sessions where we look at usually one or two sort of tools in the system. And today is no exception. We're going to have a little look at announcements, the email tool, and the activity feed tool, with the idea being that we're getting quite a few questions at the moment around the functionality in each of those different areas, particularly announcements. So we get a bit of a refresher around how they work. And then it's an opportunity for you to then ask questions and we can go off on whatever tangent you'd like to go off on. So I am recording this, so if you'd like a copy of it after the fact, you're more than welcome to send me an email and I'll give you that. But they will end up going into the LMS transition page where the other learning resources are kept. All right, so look, let's start by going into the training site. And it is worth noting that there is a significant difference between the announcement tool itself and the very first exposure we have to announcements in our sites, which is the announcement widget sitting on the subject homepage. Now, the announcement widget essentially does a few things. It provides a personal announcement experience, which means you have control over how this information appears to you or doesn't appear. And you'll notice as announcements come in to your announcement widget area that you have the ability to dismiss these items, which means effectively that you getting rid of them means you no longer have to look at them, but it does not delete them from anyone else's view. So at the moment, I am dismissing announcements so that I don't have them taking up real estate in my announcement widget, but that doesn't impact on anyone else. So every user, student, staff, or otherwise can do the same thing. They can dismiss announcements from the widget so they don't have to look at them again. You'll notice as well that within the announcement widget options, the first thing in there will take us into the full announcement tool itself. We can jump straight to creating a new announcement. We can reorder the announcements that we have currently sitting inside our widget and what order we see them in if we wanted to. You can subscribe. RSS essentially means that you're going to get an email notification every time there's a new announcement. It's worth keeping in mind, I mean, an RSS feed is quite a particular thing. It will give you the ability to use particular tools, feed aggregators, to capture announcement information. And I think maybe that's a little bit sort of, I don't know, RSS feeds were a lot more popular maybe 10 years ago when people were subscribing to particular web pages or podcasts, for example, but essentially they're still quite commonly used. But I would argue with something like announcements in the LMS, we already have that information fed to us both in system and out of the system using our notifications. So I'm not sure that an RSS feed is going to be that popular with students unless they want their subject announcement information to come into a particular tool on a mobile device, for example. So the same place where they're subscribing to some cooking show and episodes of some murder mystery thing that maybe they've got, but also announcements from the LMS, and they want an RSS feed to have that added all into the same tool, maybe they'll use RSS, but otherwise I don't see it being utilized a lot. And then we have our notifications. And normally I'd be encouraging people to go into their profile area and to check their notifications. And you'll notice that underneath announcements for your own settings, when we have a new announcement made, you'll get an email. So do students. When an announcement is updated, however, it'll change in the system if you go back and look at it, but you're not going to receive an email notification. So this is the default setting for both staff and students with announcements. And if you send an announcement out but you want to make changes to it, by default, the students will not get an email. There is a however here, and I'm going to show you through that in a minute after we make some announcements. All right, so look, as with many other parts of the Brightspace system, there are multiple ways to get to this tool. You can go through the Brightspace announcement widget on the subject homepage and click the word announcement, and it will load your announcement dashboard. That's one way of getting there. You can use the menu options that are next to it, where we could go to the announcement tool, or to make a new announcement that would take you to the same area. Underneath the communication option in the nav, announcements is the very first option there. That will open the announcement dashboard. And if that wasn't enough for you, we also can get to the tool through our subject admin area, which students cannot. And underneath communication tools, announcements. So we've just pretty much provided 4 ways of getting through to the announcement area if one of them wasn't enough for you. So look, I'm going to use the one in the subject admin area for now. It opens up my announcement dashboard, which gives me a full history of announcements that have been made in the subject, whether or not they've been dismissed from my personal view, or if they've been deleted. I'll also see them here and I can recall them. If there are future announcements with a date that's been set somewhere in the future, obviously, you'll see this status saying scheduled next to them. So the status area is quite important, but essentially any announcement in the subject is going to be captured inside this dashboard. You can then decide what you're going to be doing with that if you're a member of the teaching team. So I guess we'll start with the most important piece. How do we make a new announcement? Clicking on new announcement, it allows us to put in a title. If this announcement is going to be going to particular cohorts of students, you may want to think about putting something that will indicate that to you when looking back who it was for. So for example, you might put in Port Internal, Bathurst Distance, Wagga Distance, something like that into the title. This is more as a reference point for yourself rather than anyone else. Then we get the body of our announcement. And at that point, we have the Brightspace editor available to us, which means we can use things like the Insert Stuff tool and add in video files, local files we could embed if we wanted to, bringing things from the content collection in the subject site if you wanted to embed those in the announcement. A video note would mean it would use your webcam and your headset to make it a multimodal announcement if that's what you wanted to do. You can also do other things like obviously putting in hyperlinks or embed YouTube clips, etc. All of those can go into the announcement body. However, it is worth thinking about the fact that most students will be receiving announcements through a mobile device as an email. Not all these types of media will play within an email reader, which means that they would have to come back into the system to be able to watch them properly. So if you're embedding video and things, Panopto videos, stuff like that, they won't play from an email. You'll get a link and it will bring you back into the Brightspace system to watch it. So it is worth thinking about the types of media that you put into your announcements. You can also use the quick link tool, which is our little chain icon here, and that will allow you to link from the announcement to any other part of the subject site. So if it's week 1 and you wanted the students to be looking at a particular folder, you can quick link through to that folder and either to the start of the folder where you could just hit plus, or the overview, the first file, or individual files, you can do that. So at that point, I've got a quick link here, which is going to make the students jump straight to the overview for week 1 within my announcement body. Then we get to set our dates. You want it to go out straight away, which it will by default, or you can set a time and date in the future. The end date area is less attractive. Essentially, that'll mean the announcement disappears forever from everyone's view. Why you would do that with an announcement, I don't know, but maybe there's a reason for it. You can attach files, or again, use your webcam or your headset to attach audio and video to the announcement itself. And then the last part, but not the least important, is release conditions. And release conditions are how we target anything inside Brightspace to particular cohorts. So I mentioned before in the title that this was going to go out to Port Macquarie students. And the way that I make the system do that, to restrict it, is to attach a release condition. So I'm going to create a new release condition. The type is a class list section enrollment. I want it to have a look at who's enrolled in the subject and pick one particular cohort, one section. At that point now, it'll detect automatically who I have enrolled, and I can send this announcement just to Port Macquarie internal students. And if I hit create, that's now identified underneath. This announcement will now go just to Port Macquarie students. Hit send, or publish in this case, we'll send it out straight away, or you can set it as a draft and change that and publish it later on if you're not ready to send it out straight away. That is the basics of creating an announcement itself. We hit publish, and it will now appear inside the announcement widget, or the brief view of announcements on our subject page. There it is. It even tells me there that that little fork icon tells me that it has been attached to a particular cohort. It has a restriction against it, which is good. There's my title again, reminding me of who it was for. So that's in place. And I can now dismiss it if I've decided I've read it and I don't need to see it again. If I was to reopen that announcement by clicking on it, selecting the title will allow me to open it in full. But as a member of the teaching team, I can edit it as well. And if I wanted to make changes to an announcement, which I've been asked about a few times this week, the one option you need to be aware of if making a change is now underneath the body. It says, is this a major edit? And are we going to send an email notification out for anyone that may have dismissed it? So that's not a bad one, because it effectively, when we republish, it's going to send a notification out to anyone who's gotten rid of it. So we'd need to tick that box. The other question I get asked is, what if I want to send the announcement to more than one cohort, but not all of them? And if that's the case, we go through the same process of adding release conditions that we did initially. So we made this announcement just for Port Macquarie students. I'm now going to actually go in and create the same release condition again. And that is, I want it to refer to the class list, a section enrollment. And I also want students in Bathurst internal mode to get this announcement as well. Hit create. It's now added them to this list, but the catch here is that just above, it's talking about how students access this item. And by default, it says all conditions must be met. So I don't know how a student can be enrolled in both Bathurst internal and Port internal, but we need to change this condition to any condition rather than all. At that point, if they're enrolled in either this or this, they will now get this announcement. If I hit update, it's now sent that out again, and it will be sitting in our announcement widget on the landing page, and it's been republished. So I'll stop there for a second. Do we have any questions or comments around the announcement tool itself or the announcement widget on the subject homepage? Any experiences using this so far?
Lachlan, there's nothing on the chat at the moment. It's all clear.
Thanks, Josu.
And we welcome Lawrence, who just joined in.
Oh, welcome, Lauren. Good to see you.
I think it's quite easy to use. I was a bit confused when we first started the session with scheduled and the publish.
Yep.
But then realised if I schedule it, then they'll go out when I want them to go out. So other than that, I think it was reasonably easy.
Pretty straightforward to use. That's good, Nicole.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. It's good feedback. Have you found yourself dismissing announcements that you no longer want to have to see in your own view, or you just leave them all there?
No. I've just dismissed them all after you told us about it. So thank you.
No worries. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, otherwise it's kind of a non-ending sort of scroll in a way until you actually end up collapsing the widget itself. Once you do that, you obviously get that bring it back to that view where it's not using all that space anymore. But otherwise, they get a little bit out of control, I find. And I think students will very quickly get into the habit of dismissing announcements when they come through. They're not going to just leave them there. But they can still go back into the announcement dashboard itself and see all of the announcements in there, including the ones they've dismissed. So the difference with that is if you end up deleting an announcement, so I've dismissed this one here from my own view, but if I turned around and actually deleted it, that would remove it from the student view as well. So that's the difference in roles with if you're in the teaching team and you're deleting announcements versus students just dismissing it from their view. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. I don't think you can go too wrong with announcements, but I think if you're making changes to them, there's that question around, do I make a whole new announcement or do I just update the original one? So that's where that box around a major edit and sending out a notification to people is important, as is knowing how the notification settings work, because by default, students are not going to be emailed when an announcement is updated, only when it's sent out the first time, a new announcement. So yeah, it's I'm going to assume that they're going to dismiss them pretty quickly, get into the habit of dismissing announcements. And that's why when we make an edit or a change to an announcement, we need to tick that box that's underneath saying that it's a major edit. So we make sure they get a notification. All right, that is the announcement tool in a nutshell. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the email tool inside Brightspace. So one of the benefits we have, if I go back to the subject homepage, when you get into your individual subject sites, you're going to see this message alerts icon. Effectively, it's an email tool. If we open it up, it has the word email there. And this tool will allow you to draft emails that really are intended to be subject specific. And what I'm getting at here is that if you click on the address book for this email, it will bring up everyone that is enrolled in the subject underneath. So at that point, whether they're students or academics, I can choose either individuals or a whole lot who are going to get this subject specific email. Now that messaging it's dynamic. And what I mean by dynamic is it recognizes what your email address is. And if anyone replies to it, it's going to come to your Outlook inbox. It doesn't come back to Brightspace. So you send it out from here, and there's a very good reason for doing that, which I'll show you in a moment. But any replies to it are going to come back into your work email inbox. So maybe there are all sorts of different scenarios that you may be sending out emails to either large groups of people or to individuals. Maybe they're connected to assessment, maybe it's something else. But sending them from this tool means that we have a copy or a register of that happening. So we get a record, and we find that record here underneath Sent Mail. Inside the email tool, under Sent Mail, we have a full listing of communications that have come from the subject as emails to the students. So that's handy in and of itself. You get the Brightspace editor, which means you can use insert stuff or the quick link tool, but you can also start filtering from that address book list who's going to receive this. So if I wanted this to actually not go to just everybody or one individual student, other filters I have available, I can target it to particular cohorts. So we can use our filters. That'll then give us the option to send the communications to particular cohorts of students at that point. If we've created groups in the subject for anything, I can filter by group as well. So marking teams, student groups for anything that you may have set up, we can target those comms as well. So look out for your filter options that are available. Otherwise, potentially you can be going through selecting individuals from this list. And you'll have the choice as well to decide if it's going to be a blind copy or standard, sort of CC, for example, to the email. You've got those options as well. So the email tool lives there by default. If you're going to access it of your own volition without thinking about anything else, you're just going to launch it. But it is also integrated to other parts of your subject site. And what I'm getting at there, oh, there's an attachment option underneath. I probably should have mentioned that. the other places that we can access is so things like our assessment dashboards. If I was looking at this essay, for example, you'll see that there is an email option that now it lives above our assessment submission area. So if I wanted to send out a targeted communication to this particular student, I could send an email. It opens up that same tool, and I could send something to Beck in this case. So it's exactly the same tool, but you'll find that option, the email option, in different parts of the system. It'll allow you to send targeted comms. Above your assignment dashboard, you'll notice that there's also a tool here now that allows you to email users that haven't submitted. So in the instance that you've hit a due date and you've got students who haven't submitted yet, or you're approaching that point and you wanted to send a comms to them, like, you've got 2 days. If you haven't got an extension yet, you need to get one, etc., etc. You can use this option. And again, it opens the same email tool, except it's now identified all of the students in the subject that haven't sent an assignment, and then you can decide what it is that you're sending to them. So that's quite handy, I think, as a function. And again, because we've used this tool, we get that record underneath sent mail of those communications. So instead of trying to manage it inside your own personal inboxes, for example, we at least have a record in system of that stuff happening. So that's not too bad. You'll find that email tool, as I said, either in certain assessment areas. I think it exists in the quiz tool as well. I'll just confirm. If I was to jump into a particular quiz, let's grade that quiz. No email option. Okay. Only in the assignment tool. That's interesting. What about more actions? No. I can export. So only in the assignment tool. What about if I select the user's name instead? Anything else? No, still nothing. Okay, so the email tool lives inside the assignment dashboards, but not in the quiz dashboard. That's an interesting distinction. Anyhow, any comments or questions at that point?
Nothing on the chat, Lachlan, and so the floor is open, and we also welcome Trudy to the room.
Welcome, Trudy. Good to see you. We've been looking at the announcement tool and then the email tool itself. The last one I was going to look at was the activity feed option, but I was just curious if anyone had come across the email tool anywhere else within their subject sites. The option to send that out. I think you'll find that it also lives inside your class list. So if you go into your subject admin area and jump into your class list, you've got the option here to email particular students from the class list, whether you've filtered that down to particular cohorts or groups or all users in the subject site. You can send either sort of bulk emails or targeted individual emails as well. So it does live in a few different places. You'll also see a tool here to email the whole class list, which effectively will launch the same tool. Ask who we're sending it to, for example, and then it will allow you to draft the email. So that's handy, I think, at that point. All right, let's have a look at the activity feed tool.
Lachlan, just before we move on,
Groups tool.
Trudy's got a comment on the chat.
Worries. You've seen it in the groups tool as well. Good idea. If we go into groups, let's have a look. Right, so you can either email every group, for example, that's in a particular category, or you can send it to targeted groups. Or I think you may find that if we go into the individual group, can we then target it further? No, we can't. All right, so it is at the whole group level where we can send it to every different group that's inside a category or just individual ones. Thank you for that pickup, Trudy. That's great.
My pleasure, Lachlan.
All right, so last thing that we're going to look at is the activity feed tool, which I'm not sure if people have started using yet in their subject sites or not. But effectively underneath the calendar, we have the activity feed option, which will create a persistent post, which will live on the homepage that students cannot dismiss, cannot delete. It just lives there. And that post happens when we hit add a post. You have the option to make this post visible to all students, which it is by default, or you can make it appear only to particular cohorts of students. So if you have some type of critical resource or information that only needs to be provided to either one or several cohorts, we can use this tool to provide it to one or several, but not all. Otherwise, we would use all sections. And at that point, the post itself does give us access to some options in the Brightspace editor, apart from text. We get the insert stuff tool again. We also get the quick link tool, which means we can send them to other parts of the subject site if we need to. But maybe you can think of some scenarios for the types of information which students always need to have throughout the session, potentially on hand, available to them when they first join the subject site, rather than having to go looking for it. I might have a look at medicine's example, but the last comment I would make here is that you probably want to turn off comments in your activity feed area, because this lives on your homepage, your subject homepage, and maybe you don't want any student in the subject putting their opinions about the value of this item or anything else on the subject homepage visible to everybody else. Maybe there's better places to do that. Can get potentially out of hand if you have disgruntled students, perhaps. All right, so important announcement or resource, etc. in here. There is an attachment option that lives at the bottom of it, which means if you've got files you want to provide to the students, we can do that. Drag something in here. That'll do. There's a PDF there. And then you can either schedule it or send it immediately. At this point, I'm going to post this. I will steer you away from using this assignment tab, which lives in the activity feed. And that's because we don't create assignments from this point. We create them in our assignment tools, the assessment tools, sorry, either the assignment dashboard or the quiz dashboard or your discussion board. Creating them from here is going to create other types of problems later on. So I would stick to using this for messaging rather than trying to create an assignment from the activity feed section of your session subject site. So I'm going to post this. There it is. It's now stuck or a sticky, whatever you want to call it, etc., living on the homepage for students to access. I might just show you how medicine has used it in their site, but then I'll just open the floor to questions of any sort. So if we jump into Med 111, these guys have activity feed posts. In this case, timetable information. They've put videos in here. See the condensed real estate? What happens if you start embedding different types of media here? Doesn't necessarily look amazing. Yes, I can play it. Yes, I can open it in full screen, but this by default doesn't look super. In some cases, they've provided hyperlinks to critical external resources for the students to get access to. But
Just a quick,
yep, go ahead.
Sorry, Lachlan, just a quick question. What view is this? Is this a lecturer's view or is this a student's view?
No, this is a administrator view. I'll switch to the student view for you. It's a good point. Okay, so there's the tool. There's the posts. There's the YouTube clip, for example.
And the student can't delete these.
Can't delete them. Can't dismiss them, can't delete them. Yep, that's right.
So are they using that instead of announcements?
Yeah, so a choice has been made here to make this available always for students not to be able to remove it, so they've put it here. Now, you could say maybe you'd put it in a discussion area potentially. They wouldn't be able to delete that either. But because this is on the home page, I suppose there is a different value proposition with having this rather than an announcement. I think the tool starts to lose a little bit of its effectiveness when you have multiple kind of activity feed posts, so kind of getting more than 3 or 4, and you can see already we're having to start scrolling. Each of the individual posts, you have a choice on whether or not you want to pin it so that it stays at the top. So are some things of more value than others? You can certainly decide that as well. But they can't get rid of it. But if it's right down the bottom of a whole bunch of other things for scrolling, I'm not sure how valuable it's going to be at that point. If we check our notification settings again, just to see how they react to activity feeds rather than announcements, they get an activity feed notification or email when there is a new post. So students cannot create activity feed posts by default. And unless you turn on comments, you'll be the only one that can add those to the front page. Yep.
Thanks.
No worries. So that is the activity feed tool in a nutshell. I'm looking forward to seeing how different people use this tool in their different subject sites, all the different scenarios that people might have, whether it's to point to internal resources, external resources, documents that students need to have available to them for other reasons, etc. That's going to be quite interesting to see. But at that point, what I'm going to do is actually stop the recording. We are just past time.